Hey everyone, I'm here to go over this task list here for Photoshop certification exam review. So I'm just going to go through these and kind of give some tips and tricks for the exam along the way. So first step is create a new document using the letterprint preset, accept all default settings. Go to Photoshop, click New File, or go File New, Control N, and then all your presets are at the top here. So it says Print, Letter, and then it accept all defaults. And then if you had to name it on the exam, this is where you'd add the name right there, and then hit Create. And then you go to the next question. All right, next here we've got write your name using Arial Black 36-point type. Change the color to 32, 32, 32. So this is a hex code. I'll show you how to change that color in a minute here. Okay, so first I'm going to use the type tool to start typing, and then I'm going to write exactly what it says to write. So it said to write your name. Ha ha ha. And then I'm going to select the type like it's selected in like Microsoft Word, not like this, right? So I'm going to double click here, and that gives me the type tool, and so I have that selected. And then you can do this from the character panel or from your options bar. The options bar also has the character panel. You just pops it, or that's the paragraph one, right? Character panel's right here. These should be grouped together, right? I'm going to drag that out. So character panel, right? So I'm going to change this to Arial Black, which it already is. So I could just start typing in Arial. I have tons of typefaces on here, so like you could just start typing and then Arial, and then you change this to black. That doesn't mean it has to be black. That's just like it's a thicker, bolder typeface. And then 36 goes the size. And then the color, I'm just going to double click right here. Or before I started typing, I could have set my color with my foreground color. Just double click, and then that's where I'm going to type in that 323232. And this is a hex code for web colors, right? So if I'm coding a color, that's the code for this particular shade of dark gray. And so now my text is dark gray. Go to the move tool, you can see that everything's looking good. All right, the next step would be to adjust the tracking to -100. Okay, so tracking is the space in between a large group of letters like this. Kerning is the space in between two individual letters. So from my character panel, you can see that this VA has a line through it. That means I'm adjusting the kerning. Where this VA has the two letters selected, that's how I adjust the tracking. So like, you'll notice I don't have a group of letters selected, so it's not letting me adjust the tracking, right? So I could adjust the kerning right now. Another way to do that, like if I want to see how there's a lot of space between the U and the O compared to the O and the U, I could just put my cursor in here and then hold Alt and use the left and right arrow keys to kind of adjust the kerning. If I select all the type and I go here and I could type in -100 or just click on it here, -100, and then hit the check mark, and then I would go on to the next question. Okay, and then select all the pixels on the type layer, and then create a new fill layer with color BBBBBB. All right. So first of all, to select all the layers on any sort of layer, like so if I have another layer here, right, and I just paint on it, right, like some stuff here. If I right-click on the image, not the layer, right, so I get different options. Right-click on the image, I could select all pixels. Another way to do that, if I go up to select, deselect, or Control D, and then if I just hold Control while I'm over the image, you could see I could select these parts. So I'm going to get rid of that random layer. Now that same thing applies to type. So like if I hold Control and click on the type layer or right-click, it makes a selection of all that type, right? And then the next step would be to create a new layer. I can do that by clicking the plus sign on the layers panel here, or going here, new layer, or going over to layer, new layer, right? So I'm just going to click new layer. And then we need to fill it with a color. So the first thing I'm going to do is make my color, right? So this is just another hex code that is BEBEBE, and then hit OK. So now my foreground color is the correct color. Next thing I want to do on my new layer selected, I'm going to go up to Edit, Fill, and then change it to foreground, and then hit OK. And then I could go again to Select, Deselect, and I've got that. All right, the next step is to deselect all selections, which I just did, and then click on the Move tool, then use the up and down left arrows to move the gray pixels to create a drop shadow. Okay, so select the Move tool, and we'll go to, this is the only type right, so this is pixels now. So I could still edit this type. I can't edit this gray type, because that's just pixels. So click on the only type layer, and then I'm going to use the up and down, or the left and right arrow keys. I'm using down and right to make a little drop shadow, right? You can see how that looks. And the next step. Apply a bevel and emboss to the gray pixels. Okay, so bevel and emboss is an effect. So to the gray pixels would be this layer has gray pixels. I would go to layer, layer style, and then bevel and emboss, or the easier way, just like FX here on your layers panel at the bottom, FX, bevel and emboss. And then it might say to, like, the question might say, add a bevel and emboss and soften it by 5 pixels, or change the size, or some of these things here. So as long as you can get to where it says bevel and emboss, all this other, whatever it says, just look for the next thing, like add depth, or change the technique to chisel hard or something. Don't know what that is, per se, but you could find it for the exam, right? It didn't say anything though, so I'm just adding a bevel and emboss, leaving all my defaults, and hitting OK. You see I created a little metal effect there. All right, convert the type layer to a smart object, and then add a blur Gaussian blur effect, smart filter with a radius of 8. Okay, so smart filter is just a filter attached to a smart object. So I'm going to go to the type layer, and then to convert this to a smart object, I'm going to right-click, convert to smart object. Right, so now it's a smart object. The next thing it says to add, so now that it's a smart object, I'm going to go up to filters and add a blur, and then Gaussian blur. Right, and then it said to change the radius to 8, which it already is, and then hit OK. And then if I press Z for the zoom tool, you can see like that changed that black text. See if I turn that filter off, I have the text like that, and then it just blurs that out, so now I have like a homemade drop shadow look going on here. All right, next step. Group all the layers and name the group type. All right, so it won't let me group the background layer because it's locked. So I'm actually just going to select both of these. If I wanted to, I could unlock this, right? But I'm just going to group these two together. So hold Shift, or I could hold Control. Like if I wanted to click on layer 0 and layer 1, I would hold Control. If I want to click on all of them, I hold Shift and click on the top first. But I just want these two. And then just click on the folder icon, or go to the layer panel options and new group. Same with over here, layer new group, but I'm going to click on the folder because that's the easiest, and then I could just double click on the name here and call it type. And when you're adding names to things on the exam, I would suggest just copying the text and pasting it, just so there's no chance of making, that'd be a horrible way to get a question wrong, is if you didn't use a capital T or something like that. All right, so then add a vector rectangle around your name and change the corner radii to 0.25 inches. Move the vector shape underneath the top layer, the type group. Okay, so all my vector tools are down here. If I click and hold here, there's my rectangle tool. My type tool is a vector tool. This is pen tool is a vector tool. This is vector point selection, point and segment selection. So with my vector rectangle tool, mine is set so it draws from the center. So you would just click and drag and create it. So I've created a rectangle. Oh, it already filled with the pattern. I'm going to just leave that. Fill that with white for now. So. And then to change the radii, so like if I just click with the rectangle tool, it gives me a dialog box. If I need a very specific size, width, and height, and this is where I would change the radii to. But if I've already created the rectangle, I could go down here and try to get it to exactly 0.25, which, well, that actually worked pretty quickly. But again, the exam, time is an issue. So like if you go to the properties panel, and these are linked together, see now they're not, now they are linked. And I'm going to change the radii from the parents in the properties panel, and then I'm just going to put 0.25. And then this says inches already, so I'm okay. But if it said pixels, I would definitely want to do the IN. In fact, I would just do that just to be safe. And then hit Tab, and you should see them all change, right? And then move this underneath the group. Just slide it down and make sure it's not in the group like this. You want it underneath the group. All right, next step. Add a vector, yeah, we did that. Give the vector shape a water sand pattern. So like if you don't know how to make a pattern or add a pattern in Photoshop, the keyword there is pattern. So the first place I would look would be to window to see if there's a pattern panel. Like if it said add a ice style, right? You don't know how to add a style or what that is in Photoshop, go to window and look for a panel with that name, right? So we're going to go to the patterns panel, and then you can see I could just search this up here, water. And then I could, if I put my mouse over these, it'll give me the right names, right? Water pool, water sand, right? So then I would just click on that, and then it's applied to the fill of that particular shape. Add a vector rectangle, and then double checking to make sure I did everything. Give the vector shape a water sand pattern. Good. On to the next one. Now I'm going to add a drop shadow of the vector shape using the FX on the layers panel. Okay, same way we added the bevel and emboss, just make sure I have the rectangle selected, click on my effects, and then drop shadow. And then again, it didn't say to change anything here, so I'm just going to hit OK. And then next thing, change the fill of the vector shape to 50%. So the point of this question is so you understand the difference between opacity and fill. So this is a vector shape has a stroke and a fill, right? So if I draw a vector shape here, there is a fill and a stroke. So this is pretty obvious here. Like when I reduce the fill, it's going to only, oops, that's the wrong. Let me get rid of that random rectangle. Have my rectangle. So like I'm going to reduce this. You could see that this makes certain parts of the layer disappear. Oh, the period just ended. But the opacity makes everything disappear. So that's something to keep in mind, right? Fill changes pixels, but leaves effects and things like that, where opacity changes the entire layer, like how I want to hide everything on that layer, or do I want to hide some of the stuff? So you definitely need to understand that. And then instead of moving that slider, I'm just going to type in 50. Right. All right, next, add a custom vector shape underneath your name. Add the custom vector shape to the type group. Okay, so custom vector shapes are right here with all the other vector shapes. Custom shape tool. And then here I could change this to whatever I want. I think it was a line or something like that, right? So like underneath my name, I just add a little line. I'm going to hold shift to keep this in line. Lion. And then I need to add this to the type group by sliding it over, right? So I have my lion shape, and that's vector. Again, that from with the custom shape tool on my options bar, that's over here is where I could change which shape it is. Right? And I can change the fill and the stroke up here also. All right, and then add a new layer, move it to the bottom of your layers, and add a radial gradient for background. Okay, so I'm not gonna put it above this, right? So I'm just gonna use layer 0 here. And what you need to know about gradients is, first of all, there's a gradient tool, and this is relative to my current stroke and fill, right? So I'm gonna make it default black and white. And there's also a gradient panel, right? So if I want to create a new gradient, say I created some over here, I could use these. So like, or I could just go right up here too, and like I'm gonna go to the basics, and the basics are relative to my stroke and fill. So like if I change this to red, you can see when I go to the basics, again, it's red, and then it's my foreground to transparent for the other one. So like if I want to add a black to red gradient with the gradient tool, I would just click and drag. And this is a diamond one, so I'm going to delete that. I'm going to start with just a regular linear, right? So linear gradient means it's a line, right? Let me Control 0 to zoom out here. Whereas a radial one, that's you're drawing from the center. So these should be pretty obvious, like radial is round, linear is a line, and then this one is called an angle. It's where it's basically a 360-degree angle, right? So it starts right here on the line and then ends on that line too. And then you're not going to have to know these by heart, but you might have to match all the different things. So like this icon is, what does this look like? That's well, this is called a reflected because it goes from one gradient to like two gradients side by side, right? And then finally, the one that I showed before, this is diamond. It's the only one that kind of looks like a diamond, right? See how that kind of looks somewhat like a diamond, but so you have diamond, reflected, angular, radial, and linear. So you just have to know those names and how to use them, right? And if I wanted to create a brand new gradient, I could click on the plus sign here. And then right now my gradient goes from black to white. If I want this to go from black to transparent, I would click right here and change my color to black. So it's black to black, but then at the top is where I could change the opacity to 0, right? And let's say I want this to go from black to red to green to transparent. So if I just click right here with that little pointer, I'm just adding, these are called gradient stops, right? So then this is where I could double click on this and change the color to red, and then I want it to go to green, and then I want it to go to blue, right? So now I have a gradient that goes, it's like a rainbow here, and then I'm not going to hit OK, right? I'm going to change the name of this too, so I'm going to call this rainbow gradient. Oop, I spelled that wrong. And then I'm going to click new, right? So now it's on my list of gradients, and then I could hit OK. So now I could go over here, and then I could use my fancy new gradient I created, right? And you can see I could twist this up. And again, I have the gradient tool, so it allows me to edit the gradient. It's a non-destructive, and then I could change these, see how the fade looks, right? Change the fade. And that's kind of a summary of the gradient tool. And that completes this task list. Keep studying. You're going to do great on the exam, and definitely do more of these things here. And have a wonderful day.